Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Research Talks Qualitative Conversations. Today, we have with us Dr. Keon Gilbert, who will be speaking about a course he's offering at our Qualitative Research Summer Intensive. The title is Photovoice: Powerful Images That Communicate Current Realities to Direct Social Change. That course is offered on July 23rd. We will get more into that. I'm Maietta, president of ResearchTalk, and with us also is Jeff Petruzzelli and Paul Mihas. Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jeff Petruzzelli. I'm a qualitative research specialist at ResearchTalk. I've been here since 2001.
Great. Great to have you, Jeff. Thanks. And Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Mihas. I'm a qualitative researcher and consultant at the Odum Institute at UNC Chapel Hill, and I'm also a consultant with ResearchTalk.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. And Keon, let's just start out with you giving a little bit for folks about who you are. And then we'll get into specifics on Photovoice. It's one of the topics that we are most proud to have on our agenda. So yeah, who is Keon Gilbert?
I'm still trying to figure that out some days myself. So. At least I got the name, So Keon Gilbert, professor of public health at the College for Public Health and Social Justice at St. Louis University. Also the executive director of the Institute for Healing Justice and Equity and a fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C.
Great, great. I don't know if I told you this, Keon. One of the first projects that we advised in when ResearchTalk became a thing back in 1996 was a Photovoice project. And it was my first exposure to Photovoice and guided through. It was a wonderful project looking at the area in Thunder Bay, Canada. But there's so much to Photovoice. There are so many misunderstandings where folks just kind of take the name and assume from that what they can know about it. We're going to, here in short order, let people have some rich things to think aloud in a more informed way about what Photovoice is. When you think about new folks who have never done a Photovoice project, why would you encourage them Photovoice specifically, especially, with issues about really communicating current realities and directing social change? But I just wanted to hear a little bit about you, singing the praises, selling the merits of Photovoice, and we'll move on from there.
No, it's a great question. I think like many approaches or methods, people can overuse them or even underuse them at times. And I was exposed to Photovoice as a graduate student when I was a graduate student at the University of Pittsburgh, and then had the privilege and pleasure of taking sort of co-teaching, serving as a TA. I don't know exactly what my role was when I was a postdoc at UNC, and Jeannie Ng and Alexandra Lightfoot were co-teaching this course at UNC. And so I had a chance to see how they utilized Photovoice as a primary method of teaching students how to use, how to develop community-based, community-engaged projects. And I saw a really sort of rich integration of the method and the process and how it aligned with the general principles and foundations of community-based participatory research. And so it was a great way for me to sort of see it in action in a couple of different ways, and then to also then take it upon myself to adopt it as a method that I wanted to use for one of my postdoc projects with middle school and high school boys looking at high school dropout and health. And so what it then became for me was this amazing tool to get people to talk, and to talk about their lived experiences, to talk about their social realities by using photos. And often when you think that it may be hard for people to talk about things that are important to them or even difficult for them, sometimes the use of a photo can really be an important starting point for a really rich and in-depth conversation. And also what I've learned by doing this is that it becomes fun for people in ways that they really start to take ownership of what they are producing for you, or producing as part of the project, and really wanting to be clear about, what they are selecting, how they are selecting it. And one of the things I like to, remind people is that, you can take pictures of things that exist, or you can create, an image that you want to depict and to talk about. And I think that becomes an interesting part of the process too, is that it really starts to tap into people's creative and innovative sides in ways that they don't often get to sometimes practice or release in their daily lives.
Yeah, it's so interesting as you talk about that topic, Keon, the high school dropout and health and Photovoice in particular. Do you have a specific example of, well, what something that happened in that project? Maybe it's a data example, but in particular, when you were talking about using photos to move toward conversation, and you just cut right to the core of kind of why photo voice there. And I just wonder if you have a story from that particular project that brings it to life.
Yeah, it so one really interesting example, and so I worked with a mentoring group out of Greensboro. That was one of the groups, and they were so group of older Black men who were mentoring primarily middle school Black boys in Greensboro, and the young men came from lots of different schools, and I believe the group is called Mentors, capital MEN Tours. Um, and so I was a little concerned actually when setting up these photo voice sessions, because the mentors wanted to remain in the room. And
Mhm.
so we, had these tables, and the young people were, at these tables in the middle of the room, and the mentors sat sort of around. And I realized that the young men actually just were very free in what they shared and wanted to share, and just kind of ignored that their mentors were behind them. And after a couple of sessions, the mentor started coming up to me and saying, I had no idea that these guys, these kids were thinking about issues, or thinking about their families, thinking about what was happening in schools in the ways that they were.
Mhm.
Or even the conversations we had about gender, the conversations we had about race. And their mentors were just so surprised at the level of understanding in their own reflection about what they were seeing, what they were observing, and what they were experiencing as young Black boys. And for all intents and purposes, part of my mind was, I was thinking about the kids. I was thinking about the middle school boys. I didn't think about sort of this other unintended impact or consequence of having their mentors in the room. And it was a learning experience for them. And I think it helped them to reshape and rethink about things that they wanted to talk to them about, not just, oh, let's do homework, or, how's this going, or how's this going. But I think it gave them other things or other ways to engage those young people moving forward.
We think sometimes data collection is static and it's just meeting a point, but it's a wonderful example of not just the power of the project itself, but how people are active, their minds are active during the process, and it just leads to so many potential opportunities. And it's a real vivid example of how that plays. It's great. Yeah. Oh, Paul, do you want to, yeah, tell me what you're thinking? Let me invite you into the conversation.
Sure. I know that sometimes researchers who haven't done anything before, when they are sort of thinking about maybe moving in that direction, they sort of feel overwhelmed even before they've started. They have anxiety even before they've kind of learned a particular approach. And I also know that some researchers, they don't think of themselves as being visual thinkers, and so they automatically kind of rule out photo voice. I'm wondering how your course can kind of invite those people into this way of doing doing research, and how this might open up a whole world to them.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, one of the things I'll say is doing photo voice today is a lot easier than when I started, where I had digital cameras, and I, had to pick cameras up, develop film, and so it's a lot easier. But I think the anxieties are definitely real because unfortunately, in a lot of our disciplines and fields, we're not really taught to be creative or to integrate humanities or to integrate um, you know, sort of lots of different communication tools or those kinds of things that often involve digital media. And so I think we put ourselves in a box
Mhm.
as researchers, in part because of how we're trained and prepared.
Mhm.
I can see how that can raise a lot of anxieties, and also the idea of, well, what is this photo going to actually generate or produce?
Mhm.
That's part of sort of some of the skepticism that I hear when I talk to people for the first time about Photovoice. And it's a good place to remind people of, again, part of the principles and practices of community engagement, community-based participatory research, is that this is really a community, a participant-centered experience.
Mhm.
And allowing people to depict or describe their lives in part through a photo becomes a really sort of different way of learning for all of us, even for them sometimes. And you actually end up with multiple forms of data. And that part actually might really excite people. You just don't get the words. You also have these really amazing images as well as part of your research experience and research process. And I think people don't always they can't wrap their heads around that sometimes, that, you actually end up with multiple forms of data, which really helps with, in our traditional research language, triangulation. And to be able to do that really kind of on the spot is a really sort of key part of the process.
It sounds like it's also not just a different way of learning, but also opens up opportunities for how to present what comes out of the project.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think we don't often realize that when we invite people to participate in projects, a lot of our research is really centered on some form of drive-by research where you engage a person once and you're kind of
Yes.
Mhm.
photo voice as part of the process. You're talking to the same people multiple times. And,
Mhm.
you know, not many methods or approaches often sort of allow that, or part of the process. I mean, of course you could do multiple surveys with folks, all that kind of stuff, right? But a lot of what we do is just really sort of just one time kind of cross-sectional time points. And photo voice sort of breaks that rule in a lot of different ways, which I think is really cool and really amazing.
That's great. Yeah. Hey, Jeff, yeah, as you're kind of listening, enjoying it with us here, tell us what's on your mind.
Yeah, Keon, I wanted to pick up, you used the term participant centered. And I'm just wondering what exactly a photo voice, would you call it a photo voice session? What would it actually look like? We have an image in mind of, what an interview looks like, what a focus group looks like. But when we're talking about participant-centered research like this, what is the researcher's role? What are you doing? What does this whole photo voice look like in action?
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of it starts with some sort of question, something that you're trying to better understand or even solve. And part of um, figuring out how do you balance your interests, the question you may raise as a researcher, and what community members may want to raise or want to answer. You try to find some synergy, and you actually then invite participants to sort of reframe those questions or come up with the questions that they want to answer, and then you structure the photo voice assignments based on those questions. And sort of each time you meet with them, you get an opportunity to reframe or find nuance in those questions as they become part of the individual assignments. And so one, participants get a chance to sort of guide that process, to guide the data collection process in that way. But then also each session everyone gets to participate. Sometimes in, for example, traditional focus groups, it's easy sometimes for people to become invisible, because there's sometimes a very dominant, couple of voices, and some person may only talk once or twice. In photo voice, everyone talks. And then you get a chance to sort of build some consensus as you select a particular photo that might represent the topic of the day, or one or two photos that represent the topic of the day. And so you also get an opportunity to not only participate by talking, but you're listening to the perspectives of other people. And it's a really great way of learning about how other folks are sort of thinking about the same kind of problem, or same kind of even solution. And that's even the last part I'll add to that, is that it really does sort of move through the process of identifying a problem and then thinking about solutions. And that's automatically built into the Photo Voice project, which I really like as part of the structure.
It's beautiful. Again, it's always kind of like time is so hard we just don't have enough, right? It's a quote Willy Wonka, right? Oh, so much time, so little to do. But as you were just talking, I was thinking about, folks in the course, and after they finish the course, when someone completes this course, what do you envision changing about how they think about research, kind of a takeaway? So if you had kind of your wish list for participants, what would you hope you know happens with them as researcher after they spend the day with you?
Yep. Part of it is just some of it is just thinking about exposure, or recognizing that this is an option for your research, that, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's a little bit lower cost now, because most people have phones that they can take pictures, and you can upload pictures a whole lot, a lot easier, and it's more cost effective. And so if you're thinking about ways that you want to engage your group of people, and you don't need a ton of people to be able to do this, and actually smaller groups work a lot better, because you get repeated interactions with the same group. So if you're, at the beginning stages of a project, or trying to figure out next stages or phases in some work, or even thinking about how might you evaluate or generate solutions, I think Photo Voice is a great approach, a great method to utilize. And just considering it as an option, and digging deep into how does it work, how might it work for projects, could be really important, and maybe generate some data and information for you and your community partners in ways that you've not thought of before.
Yeah, and I guess the other piece too, we always think about this with our courses, as you know, um, we want people to take the course even if they're not ready to do a photo voice project. So if somebody's, like this qualitative generalist, and they're going to teach a qualitative approach, they're going to work with students and, co-workers and all these kinds of things. So that person who is kind of like, I have another day and I can add another course to my agenda. If they're not doing photo voice, what kind of the qualitative geek takeaways that you can learn about qualitative research in general from learning more about photo voice? And we'll close out on that question.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, part of it is learning how to develop. I mean, in all intents and purposes, Photo Voice are focus groups. And so learning how to do focus groups well becomes really important in being able to set up and manage a Photo Voice project. And I think sort of the big takeaways about qualitative research in general, sort of writ large, is that you really do learn how to manage focus groups in a way that's a little bit non-traditional, a little bit different, but you also get a lot of practice because it's kind of built into the Photo Voice process, where you're doing multiple focus groups per se, with a lot of people. And it's a great opportunity to get feedback from participants about how well the groups are structured, and how well they operate and function. So, those would be some sort of bigger takeaways about, how Photo Voice contributes to qualitative research methods, in a bigger picture.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Keon. Always great spending time with you. And thank you to Jeff and Paul. And we're looking forward to the course. And again, at the end of this conversation, there'll be information about how y'all can learn more about the course and how to register. And hopefully we'll see you that day. And yeah, so thank you so much for your time, Keon.
Great. Thank you all.
Mhm.